All right, welcome everybody to the Board of Aldermen meeting. Hope you all had a great New Year and holidays. Up first, minutes from the previous meeting, December 21st, 2020. Entertain a motion.
I'll move to the approval.
Second.
We have a motion that has been seconded. Are there any edits, changes, anything? Alderwoman Mattis.
Yeah, did Henry get a couple of minor edits? One was actually important. I emailed them to Henry. Did he get them?
I did not.
Under reports of standing committees, the Charter and Ordinance Committee, the important edit is that the need for the city to be an additional insured, not insurer. That was the important one.
Okay. All right. Very good. Is that it, Alderwoman Mattis?
Yeah, and just there was a spelling change, right of way instead of right away. That's all.
Okay. Very good. Thank you. Alderman Garuso?
Yes, under unfinished business, Alderman Garuso voted no. It's not noted on there.
If I may.
Yes.
Hey, Sam.
Yes.
In regards, I have for years and years and years, unless we do something that's roll call, I don't list it as unanimous or I don't list no votes. If the motion's passed, it just meant there was at least 6. So just so you know, I don't necessarily, if someone votes no, I don't strike that out. I just wanted to, unless you folks want to change that, I'll do whatever you would like me to do.
Okay, I'm fine with that. I understand. Thank you, Henry.
Not a problem. Any other edits to the minutes? Hearing and seeing none, we have a motion. It's been seconded with the accepted changes. Would all those in favor please indicate by saying aye?
Aye.
And those opposed? Motion carries. We are now on to outside the rail. Are there any members of the community who wish to address the board on matters not on the agenda? Hearing nothing, I will move on to communications from the mayor. Mayor Allaire.
So thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Just have one issue tonight. I had sent you along a memo earlier today. So referencing past practice and to make sure that the interim DPW commissioner has all the authorities necessary to carry out the functions of his office, and also following the charter. That memo spoke to my submission of the name of Jim Rotundo formally to the Board of Aldermen as my appointment to the interim DPW commissioner until a permanent replacement has been named and approved by the board. So I put that name before you tonight, and I ask if you would table the nomination, please.
Move to table.
Second.
All right. We have a motion on the table and it's been seconded. All those in favor of tabling the nomination of Jim Rotundo for interim Public Works Commissioner, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? Motion carries. Mayor Allaire, anything else?
That's I do not. That's all I have tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Before we let Mayor Allaire go, anyone have any questions for Mayor Allaire? Hearing none, we will move on to additions and deletions to the agenda. Do we have anything to add or delete to tonight's agenda? Hearing and seeing nothing, we will move right along to reports and letters from department heads and officials. Up first, we have Treasurer Markowski, Board of Aldermen sign-off, loan agreement. It's water main improvement. This is pages 1 through 16 of your packet. Treasurer Markowski.
Okay, so what I'm looking for is the board's review and sign off of this loan document. And I just want to explain, this is part of a larger project that was approved by the voters in March 2019. This was the Northwest Neighborhood Phase 1A stormwater project. But when they got into the project, there was a portion of it that needs to be funded through the drinking water revolving loan fund. So we needed another document for that. It is not additional borrowing, but just part of a project. So.
Alderman Caruso.
If I may ask, and just to clarify, as I was reading through it, does it look like this is for $500,000, but a payback of $278? Is there like some grants coming for this or whatever? It just seemed repeatedly it was like for $500,000, but we only pay back $278, or is that, or am I just misunderstanding what I'm reading here?
No, you're correct. So when this project is finalized, we will have principal forgiveness of the $278. So the payback will be $313,000 on this part of the project.
So, Madam Treasurer, we have to approve the $592,000+, but we're still only paying back $278, or we're paying back $313 and being forgiven for $278. Is that correct?
Yes, you're correct.
Okay, thank you. So do you want to suspend the rules?
Second.
Motion to suspend the rules?
We have a motion to suspend the rules. I believe Alderman Gillum seconded. All those in favor of suspending the rules, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
The motion to, what is it, authorize the, I guess the board president and the mayor to sign this? Is that what's right, Madam Treasurer?
I just need, actually just the board chair to execute the loan documents on behalf of the full board.
So moved.
Second.
All right, we have a motion. It's been seconded. And I'll just read the request off so we all have it. The Board of Aldermen approve of the loan document for the Water Main Improvement Project RF3-371-3.0 in the amount of $592,242. Additionally, to authorize a representative, Board of Aldermen Chair, to execute the loan agreement on behalf of the full board. And that has been seconded. Is there any discussion or debate? Hearing and seeing none, would all those in favor please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Treasurer Markowski.
Thank you.
Up next, we have Clerk Heck, update on Board of Aldermen meetings 2021. This is page 17. Clerk Heck.
Hi, folks. Good evening. Happy New Year's to you all. As you know, this time of the year, we have holiday Mondays that will be quickly moving upon us. So this is just basically yearly housekeeping type measures to move, I believe it's 4 of our holiday or 4 of our Board of Aldermen Mondays, which fall on a holiday, to the next day, Tuesday. And I believe we would still need a rule suspension to take this up, and then if someone could just move those dates to the following dates, it would be greatly appreciated.
So moved. Move.
Second.
Motion
We
to
have a
suspend.
motion to suspend the rules as seconded. All those in favor of suspending the rules, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? Motion
Move to
carries.
accept the dates on behalf of the clerk's office for the Board of Aldermen meetings that the clerk has proposed.
Second.
All right, we have a motion. It's been seconded. I'll read it off just so we have it for the record. This will be Monday, January 18th to Tuesday, January 19th, Monday, February 15th, Tuesday, February 16th, Monday, July 5th to Tuesday, July 6th, and Monday, September 6th to Tuesday, September 7th. So we have a motion. It's been seconded. Is there any discussion or debate on these changes? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, everyone. We have Attorney Bloomer, who we will move to the end. Our Attorney Bloomer, are all these executive sessions or just 2 of them?
I think we can actually attempt to do the COVID leave policy in open session, and then if the conversation veers into an area where I think it would be more appropriate for executive session, we can go in then, but it's probably worth starting the discussion in open session so that we don't have to jump on and off here until we get to the executive sessions. So there are 3,
All right.
I have 3 items, and I think one we can start here in open session.
All right, then Attorney Bloomer, I will turn it over to you for item number 1, COVID-19 leave policy.
Okay, thank you. And Jody Brielle is also on the line here. She's our Human Resources Director. And it's a 12-page document, and you only received it probably midday today. So I would understand if not everybody has had a chance to read it and or digest it all. Most of what's covered in this is informed by the state's current policies on sort of what's required by the Department of Health, ACCD, and CDC guidelines. And so that those parts of it are not anything out of the ordinary that other companies haven't been doing. The difference here is that up until December 31st of this past year, the federal government had passed I think it was the Family First Coronavirus Recovery Act or something similar. And as part of that, they mandated that 2 weeks of additional leave be given to employees for purposes of using it they laid out the circumstances, but basically it was for COVID-related absences to allow people to be out and be receiving paid leave during that time. So we had been adhering to that policy, and we kind of drafted our own version of this that was based on the things that I had mentioned before, Vermont's guidance, CDC guidelines, and then it also had that paid leave piece that was mandated by the federal government. Well, that expired December 31st, but in talking internally, Jody and I and the mayor as well thought that it would be wise to continue to offer that additional paid leave, and we can kind of get into some of the reasons why. But that was something that goes beyond what's either mandated by the government or recommended by the government. So we thought it was appropriate to have the board approve this policy if that's what we end up deciding would be the best course of action. So just to give you a quick overview of what this is, if you haven't had a chance to read through or digest, it talks about if you have COVID-19 symptoms that you shouldn't enter the workplace, you should immediately contact your supervisor. And then, there's some questions that the supervisor would ask, and then we usually, it's kind of a team effort with the health officer, who's Mike Brookman. Judy Frazier is head of the safety committee, and then Jody and I and the mayor and usually department head are all kind of involved if there's been any kind of exposure or somebody is potentially tested positive. But this kind of lays out, and this is CDC guidance, that if you've got any of these symptoms of COVID-19, you're really supposed to remain out of the workplace, just so that we can prevent any kind of outbreak in the workplace. So that's the first part of it. Then it goes through kind of the various scenarios under which, you might receive a positive test, or you have a positive test without symptoms, and what we would potentially be relying on to bring you back. Again, based on CDC guidelines. The other thing that we have right now is, you may remember that the city entered into an agreement with the hospital. So the hospital is able to provide us with a lot of good, medical advice. They'll be dealing with our employees who have had potential exposures, and we'll be able to rely on them to some extent to help us understand when it would be safe to bring employees back into the workplace. So that's a portion of this as well. This lays out the general policy so that supervisors are kind of aware, and then the employees obviously know when they need to report things or when they need to stay out of the workplace. We've got some definitions of close contacts, which actually goes a little bit beyond what CDC or the Department of Health would define as a close contact. We've been keeping people out of work if they have a really any kind of exposure to somebody who's suspected to have exposure themselves. So I think the CDC talks more about if you've had exposure to someone who's tested positive, but we've been kind of working with a little bit broader definition to err on the side of caution, particularly given the essential services that the city provides, and not wanting that to spread through, any of the kind of important departments that, there would be a real effect if several people were sick or exposed. Then there's some areas where you may be eligible for leave. Under certain scenarios, you wouldn't be kept out of the workplace, but you could request to stay out if you had some, issues with caring for somebody else who was sick with COVID, or if you've got a child that's got school issues or daycare issues because of COVID-19. We kind of lay out what type of leave you might be eligible for. And then there's kind of the 4 or 5 buckets here of leave that you could use, this is on page 8. We talk about the city-sponsored COVID leave, which is kind of taking the place of that Families First Coronavirus Recovery Act leave that had been mandated. We would now be calling it the city-sponsored COVID leave. And then folks can also, if they've exhausted those 2 weeks of leave and they have sick leave, they can use that for a number of scenarios, as well as potentially vacation leave, comp time. We also are proposing here that employees would be allowed to go into a negative accrual for sick leave, and then they would kind of earn that back over time. So there's a matrix here that tells employees like what you might be able to use, which scenarios you might be able to use with which leave. There's documentation that's needed, and then at the end here, flexible work arrangement and an acknowledgement. So I know that's a lot to kind of digest in a short few minutes, but if anybody has questions, ideally you would be comfortable enough with it that you'd approve it tonight, and so that it would go into place immediately, because we do have these things that pop up on a fairly regular basis. But in lieu of being comfortable with it, either sending it to committee for next meeting, or just tabling it if you need more information that you think you can get outside of committee, you just want something additional. So I kind of leave it at that for now, and then I can jump off where anybody has interest in knowing more.
Alderman Clifford.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 2 things I'd like to ask. Matt, is this a negotiable document with the union, and has the union agreed to this at all?
We're not taking the position that it's something that the union is able to negotiate. We do have a right to maintain a safe workplace, and this is what this aims to do. The union has, we've had some instances, and the union has had feedback, and I think for the most part we've found ways, in the past several months of dealing with certain situations. So we've been able to work through it. I think there's been an acknowledgement from the unions that, this is obviously uncharted territory, and we're trying to do our best to protect both the affected employee, but also the employees that person's working with. So this isn't, not to say that the union wouldn't take a different position, but we're not really running this by them prior to enacting it.
Okay, so how crucial is it that this has to be passed tonight? I mean, we've talked about this before, getting this stuff at the 11th hour.
Yeah.
Something like this is pretty important. I mean, I feel like I'm in Congress here, like we got to pass it and not even look at it first.
Yeah, I understand. Fortunately, it's only 12 pages instead of whatever 5,000 or like I said, these things come up fairly regularly. It'll probably be Murphy's Law that if we do send it to committee that we'll get something tomorrow. But I think I think if you're not comfortable with it, it's not so urgent that it couldn't wait until the next meeting. If you're mostly comfortable, then it might be better to pass it today, and then if we need to amend something, at some point, we could do that. But I understand. I understand that we weren't able to get it to you until today, and some people may not have had a full chance to read
Right.
it. So.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I have a motion in mind, but I'll wait for the debate.
Alderman Caruso.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Matthew, I guess to start with, in the disclaimer box, I've read this. I spun through it earlier, and I'm one of few that gets a chance to do this stuff. It's multifaceted. There are employees that get it. There are people that could give it to other employees. There are people caring for children and all that stuff. I would think, and I'm not an attorney with your background, but shouldn't this disclaimer have something in there holding the city harmless too? Because this seems to me that this could be argued that, while I did what the document said, I did what the city's, what is it called, the policy, said, or whatever. I don't know. It's like, is there a source from where it came from, just to maybe, it looks cookie cutter to me. It looks like it came from somewhere, but it doesn't say that. I'm just talking about liability or something. Does it seem to you that someone could say, hey, I got it from one of your workers, and the worker said I followed this policy, and so I'm suing you because I think the policy blew up in our face? I don't know. I'm not an attorney, but I'm just wondering if there should be a line or two in that disclaimer holding the city harmless, that we are in uncharted territory and no one really knows, but we're doing the best that we can. And did you understand what I'm saying? Is it some sort of harmless in there?
Yeah,
keeping
it's a
liability down.
Yeah, it's a fair point. I don't know. Obviously, third parties probably putting something in here might not make any difference because they wouldn't be
We're third party,
to it.
right? We didn't make this. We're third party. I mean, someone else.
Oh well, we must have done a good job, Sam, because we created this out of whole cloth. It was myself and Jody and
right,
another attorney who we were picking their brain. So we did. I used my Microsoft Word skills to make the shaded boxes and.
Excellent. So maybe we should take it to our attorneys and have them look at it just to make sure we're covered. And maybe I'm wrong.
I am your attorney, but
no. I don't mean it that way, Matt. Please forgive me. I didn't mean it that way. To make sure that we're golden here. That's all. Because we're dealing with a lot of employees.
Yeah, no, I think it's a fair point. It might be worth putting something in just to give us something to add to the argument. But I think regardless, we're sort of foisting this upon the employees. So I think whether we have something in there disclaiming it or not, they would still, if they're going to bring an action like that, they would still be able to do so. We may have a little bit better argument, I guess, if we put something in there. So it wouldn't hurt to add a couple lines to that effect. That we're, particularly when we can rely on the hospital. That's, I think, what we're aiming to do. So that's part of why we have the disclaimers that, yeah, we've laid out some of these rules, but if Dr. Russell at the hospital, tells us that someone should be out for longer or is willing to release somebody sooner because, of their circumstance, or he's determined that it was some other cause for the symptoms.
Beautiful.
That was what we we're trying to accomplish there with that box. But I don't think it would hurt to add a couple lines. All it is just, a little bit of extra ink on the paper, and if it helps us down the line, then that's worthwhile to put in.
And thank you. There you go. He's calling the shots. Then it takes that what do you call it, off our backs, and he's Dr. Russell, whoever he is in control. That's perfect. Then it's his baby, and
Yep.
and anything like that thereafter. That's what I mean. Perfect. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Alderman DePoy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just wondering on the flexible work arrangements, Matt Bloomer, and the mayor, if he could weigh in on this too. Obviously, we have a couple of departments that are going to be in contact with people often, and police department, for instance, you're going to have the possibility of exposure multiple times over the year, and instead of somebody taking the leave, 2, 3, 4, 5 times during the year because they've been exposed that many times, is there more that we can do, or is there a plan that you're working on or in place at this point where people can work remotely? Obviously, with police, it's difficult. You got to go out into the neighborhood and police the neighborhood. But are there, when we have people who are out, who are injured or something, we have, light duty that we have them do, maybe answering phones and stuff. But is there something that we can put into this document that keeps people on the job, even if remotely, so that their contribution to whichever department they might be in can be increased? And that's for Matt Blumore and or the mayor.
Yeah. And
So
actually,
let me
okay.
let me answer that real quick, Matt. Yeah, just from going back in the last few months with COVID in general. Back in the spring, we closed City Hall, and a good number of the employees there ended up working remotely because we were dealing with something that was brand new. It was really uncharted territory back then, and we weren't getting a lot of guidance from the state other than telling local municipalities and private enterprises to, try to keep your people at home as much as you can to keep them safe until we can put together some sort of a plan about how this all goes, forward, how long it's going to last. So we have been doing that right along. And up to this point, we've been fairly successful in keeping our folks safe and not getting exposed. There's always going to be circumstances, especially when you're dealing with, like you say, Tom, fire and police, where employees are dealing with the public, where it's just going to be impossible to, plan on every possible circumstance, other than each department has, I think, a pretty good plan in place about how they would go about their in getting the work done if they were going to be in an exposed situation and have either remote workers or have their frontline workers, that are definitely essential, such as the sewer plant, the water plant, those sorts of things, keeping them operated to keep the general welfare of the city and the people of the city safe. So those things have been done right along. Whether it needs to be in this document or not, I'll leave that to Matt. But those are the type of things that have been done by this administration right along.
Yeah, and I would actually I would invite Jody maybe to speak about it as well, because I know she and Mike, I think, work pretty closely at the outset, and that's I think her first inclination is to see whether remote work would be possible so that the person is out of the workplace, but still, you know, able to contribute. So Jody, maybe you just want to quickly, whether you want to use you know, an example. I know we've had some folks that we've tried to set up with that.
Yeah, thanks. So yeah, early on we did have a couple of instances, and we have looked at what pieces of their job can they still do remotely. If they were waiting for test results or they were in a third-party exposure type situation, we've gone out and purchased track phones to have available to people for being able to work at home in those situations. It is really department by department, and as the mayor mentioned, we have each department has a setup of kind of what jobs can be done remotely, which jobs can't, from a process control and audit control, or just the physical setup of their job. If they are, you know, kind of customer facing, like our police department, you know, obviously there are certain jobs there that can't be done remotely. But and then what would we do if there was an exposure path where we had several members of that department that were out? So yeah, with the flexible work arrangement piece, we that was one of the first things that we did back in March, was to identify what those look like, because the governor's mandate said send as many people as you can for remote work. So we're trying to remain nimble and flexible, knowing of course that there are certain jobs that aren't really remote able. But we've added a few, you know, we also have remote work capabilities that we didn't have earlier this year. We have a provider that we used in order to allow people to log into their computer at City Hall. And when we've had small department exposures, we've been able to get people out of the work environment pretty quickly and send them home. So I'm confident that the flexible work arrangement piece of this, keeping it kind of broadly written in this document, allows us the latitude to kind of get more narrow by department when or if we need to.
And Mr. Chairman, may I just follow up on that real quick?
Yeah.
So Jody, I don't know if you, or, and this is for Jody, Matt, or Mayor Allaire. I'm just thinking, because we just went through the budget season and the police department's down to 34 sworn officers. And if they start losing people due to COVID for 10 days or 2 weeks, then we're down even more. So is there, and I know you've talked about like the workers within City Hall and others who, you know, can work remotely. But I'm just wondering if we've done any outreach to the police commission or to Chief Kilcullen to find out if he has multiple people on leave because of COVID, how they can use those officers to at least stay productive while they're in some kind of quarantine, or you know, hopefully not sick. If they're ill, then obviously they're not going to be working, but just those that would be on the protocol for possible exposure, that sort of thing. How to keep, you know, them productive even if they're you know, working remotely, and what that might look like as far as their remote work goes. So have we reached out to the police commission or to the chief to find out what that might look like?
I'll jump in, Matt. So earlier this year, we actually did have an exposure situation where we did have several folks that were potentially exposed in the police department. And again, prior to kind of jumping into that, we did ask Chief, you know, what jobs could be done, what can they do remotely. I kind of got a sense from Chief that there are certain things that, you know, can be logged in from the car, but the database piece of, say, a patrol officer's duties are very limited in that. People in kind of outside departments, you know, if there were report writing or things like that, I seem to remember we might have had a sergeant that might have been affected by that. So it really is job specific, but logging into the database system, I thought was kind of one of those limitations that I've heard of. So unlike modified duty with workers' comp, where we could bring them into a kind of a different scenario, we've not been successful in any way in finding things because of kind of the limitations on technology and what their job duties are, to be able to kind of cross over that. Some of the administrative folks can, if they were exposed, but officers, it's a really tough bridge to kind of cross. But certainly as these things are happening, Brian's 100% involved. I can tell you from the perspective of the hours that we've used this year, our public safety folks are the ones that you would obviously think, and it's vetted out in the data that we have, are the people that are out there. So keeping them safe on the front side is certainly the better outcome. But when they, do become exposed, I think our experience recently has been that, trying to work with that hospital agreement has cut the amount of time that an employee is out down considerably, because we were waiting for tests. It was tough to have kind of that information and the testing piece as quickly as we're getting it now. With Dr. Russell at the hospital, it's just been an amazing addition to kind of the resources we have so that people aren't out, that long. So.
Thank you, Jody. Thank you, Mr. President.
Yep.
Alderwoman Davis.
Yes, thank you. So I guess Matt, David, whoever, I don't really have a problem with the policy. I think it's a policy that most businesses have in place. I have a couple of questions. My first is, what is the city doing to assure that the employees are aware of their responsibilities? So, for example, every day I have to report that I don't have a fever or I have no symptoms. Is that a requirement of the city employees to report that to their department head? If it is not, it should be. It's a simple type of thing. The other thing is, we hear from the CDC that if you're working in an enclosed area, I'll pick on the treasurer's office. So if you're working in an enclosed area, you should be wearing a mask unless you have your own office. So if you get up away from your desk to go to serve a customer or go to talk to a coworker, you should be wearing a mask. I don't know that that's happening because I'm not spending the time in City Hall, but it's an opportunity to maybe tighten things a little bit so that opportunity for exposure doesn't happen. My other question is just so I understand, so the first 2 weeks are paid leave that the city does, and then after that, if it's required that you have longer, then the employer is required to take their sick time or comp time. Is that how I'm understanding it?
Yes, on your last question, yep, before December 31st, that 2 weeks of paid leave was mandated by the federal act. Private businesses actually had a way to kind of recover some of that expense through, I think, being able to hold back some of their payroll tax that they would owe. But unfortunately, the municipalities, we just had to provide it without any reimbursement. But the advantage is that obviously, if you're getting this extra bucket of leave, that you are, our feeling is that you're more apt to self-report. Like what you were saying, Sharon, is we do have thermometers that I think some of the departments are different, but we all have handhelds in our offices that we can use. And again, I think some of us are more on the honor system, and then other departments may have a more formal check-in policy. And Jody may be able to speak to that if she has more knowledge of it than I do. But to answer your question about the leave, it is 2 weeks above and beyond what you would normally get as being an employee. Some folks have utilized some of that leave already in the past year, and so this proposes that would count against these 2 weeks that the city would now be continuing to provide. And then after they've exhausted that, they can use sick leave or their other leaves, for various purposes. And I forget what your very first question was.
Yeah, the first question was just talking about with the responsibility of the employee to ensure that they're coming to work.
Okay.
That they're not coming to work and not feeling well. But it begs quickly, I don't want to beat a dead horse here. So if I'm a city employee and I think I've been exposed, I just take the 2 weeks, or I mean, I can go get tested at the hospital with the contract. But how are you doing that? I think I've been exposed. Are we not doing, like, let's say the police, if they went to respond to, say, a domestic dispute, is there contact tracing type of thing done, or is it just a guessing game that I think I might have been exposed?
No, I think Jody and Mike get pretty in depth when when somebody kind of, whether we find out through, say, Chief Kilcullen, because he knows that there was a prisoner that had COVID, or whether somebody tells their department head, hey, I was out to dinner with somebody and they're now being tested, they're now suspected of having COVID. Mike and I think Jody's been involved in most of the cases as well. They do kind of take all that information in, and now, Jody, I should kick it over to you. Now maybe some of that would be handled by the hospital rather than you guys kind of talking through it with the person, but that is happening. But at least either it used to be us, and now with the hospital agreement, I think they're able to kind of handle a lot of those questions of like, well, how long were you with the person? What do you know about the situation? Those sort of things, and then they make a determination. Again, now the hospital, we would be relying on them to say, okay, well, it sounds like they were only with the person for 10 minutes and everyone had a mask, and they never, touched or hugged or anything. So, they're deeming that the person doesn't have the type of exposure that would warrant keeping them out of work, or vice versa. They say, yeah, this person was with their spouse for the whole day, and, the spouse has tested positive. So they should be out even if they don't have symptoms, kind of thing. So Jody, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah. Yep. No, that was spot on, actually. And it's actually helped our process tremendously because, in the past it was us trying to fumble our way through. Now we have a medical professional that can actually say, okay, that is close contact, that is not considered close contact, make the decision on testing, can push that testing through pretty quickly. So that has been a real help for us. Would talk about, okay, so we think there's a strong possibility that this person was exposed, and then we would enact kind of our own contact tracing from there. If it was positive, they would get in touch with the state. So it really tees off a lot of events after that, and using the provider at Rutland Regional, they've been a big help. You kind of nailed it in your description, Matt. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
And if I could, this is Dave, just to add a couple of things. It has been communicated to all city employees through the department heads that everyone does have a personal responsibility. If they believe that even in the slightest chance that they've had any kind of exposure, they are, supposed to be communicating that to their immediate supervisors so that the appropriate steps could be taken. So that's been made clear to everybody more than once and repeatedly. And as far as the masks go, it's everybody in City Hall, and I do believe in the other departments too, are required to wear masks at all times during their course of employment. So, and I know people are doing that in the building that I'm in. So,
thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Gillum.
Yes, thank you very much. There's some dates in here, like March 31st on page 8. So this document's no good after March 31st, or am I reading this wrong?
Yeah.
Or is this a living document?
I tried to design it that way so that there'd be an expiration in case, I guess so that we'd have a chance to revisit it prior to that date. But if we didn't, it would their right to the leave that we're creating would expire March 31st again, unless the board wanted to extend it beyond that. I was kind of thinking that we won't really know how everything's going and how much, I guess, virus is out there. Maybe at some point the board would feel like this additional leave isn't as necessary, or so that's why I kind of hardwired a date in, but it's purely arbitrary, that March 31st date.
If I could jump in, Congress had actually enacted kind of an extension to those who are voluntarily doing this through that same date. So I think that marries up very nicely. And again, it's a voluntary thing, and they're saying 3/31. So I think, again, for us, it would just kind of be a target date. We have to work on pretty hard and fast dates. When people come through and want leave, we need to know whether we can say, yes, you're going to get this, or no, you're going to get that. So, but if we needed to, if things kind of went south and we needed to extend it, I think to Matt's point, we would come back to you and say we're in a different place right now.
If I may, another question. On the last page, an acknowledgement page, so every employee has to sign this document, am I correct?
That's the plan,
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so obviously we can't hold this up for another 2 weeks. I think it's very important we get this in the hands of the employees so they have a document and some requirements that they need to be aware of. So I think we need to deal with this tonight. Thank you.
Alderman Torrey?
Thank you. So actually, Alderman Gillum's question was a lot of my question in terms of wondering how long this is going for, because we really don't know kind of the end of coronavirus. So that's very helpful. So I appreciate that. And then my only other question, I didn't get a chance to really review it, but given that it's only going to be really in place for a couple months, and my guess is it's built on the experience that you all have had since last March. It's probably, does what we need it to do. My question was around the use of the leave. It said in that matrix that it wasn't, you couldn't use it if it was, the exposure was as a result of out-of-state travel. And I'm just wondering if you could explain that a little bit. Is there any wiggle room if somebody had to go because their parent or someone had to go to the Boston hospital and somehow they got exposed? I'm just kind of wondering if what the reasoning for the out-of-state travel wouldn't allow them to use it for it. If you could just explain that.
Yeah, it was actually kind of born out of the rules that we were operating under with the original FFCRA leave, where it did not distinguish, if you kind of voluntarily put yourself in a quarantine position. So over the summer, we were kind of fearful that people would, say travel to like a yellow or red county, and then when they would return, they would have to quarantine, and they would say, well, I have to quarantine, so I get to use my, 14 extra days. I'm not sure that happened at all, or maybe it didn't. If it did happen, I don't think it happened very often. But the idea was, in carrying it through here, is that right now, if you go out of state at all for I guess a non-exempt reason, you can go for work or for doctor's appointments and those kind of things. But if you just travel to visit family out of state, the state is mandating that you quarantine when you get back. And we just didn't feel that the city-sponsored leave should be used in those scenarios. That in those scenarios you would still be kept out of work because you're subject to the quarantine, but you would be responsible for using your own sick leave or vacation or whatever you have to cover that time. And we thought it would be too difficult to differentiate between one person's kind of valid excuse, like what you brought up, if somebody has to go see a parent that's having an issue or that they need to help them, versus somebody who's just going to the beach or something. But we thought it would be too hard to differentiate between probably some the gray in the middle of those two things. So that's why we made it sort of a hard and fast rule that kind of if it's due to travel, that you wouldn't be eligible for the city leave, and that's how it kind of came about.
Any other questions for Attorney Bloomer or Jody?
Motion to suspend the rules.
Second.
We have a motion to suspend the rules, and it's been seconded. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Go ahead.
Just say a motion to have the board, what are we looking to do here? Have the board approve this? I would say if the city attorney would accept some of the debate that was brought up here tonight. I'm trying to find the last page. What are we looking to do? Doesn't have, what's your motion, Matt? I don't see it on the.
Yeah, I think it would just be a motion to approve the policy. And I'm forgetting if there were any other comments other than yours, Sam. If that was the.
Oh, Alderman Davis had a couple of real good ones, I thought, there too.
Okay. If you
Maybe
want
you
to
can look back when you deal with Henry, but they aren't, I don't think anything major enough to not approve this tonight. But I think it's a good motion that we get this approved tonight, and I don't think the few things were anything major.
Okay, I was definitely planning to add a couple lines from your comment. I don't know if, just so I'm not getting it wrong, Sharon, did you have anything that you thought should be?
I don't think so. I just wanted to understand what we were doing, I guess, as a preventative action. And so we had little opportunity to use this policy. And then my other question was just that the mandated 2-week city side, understanding that piece of it. So I don't think so. I think Jody has got it covered, and I think it's just diligent on the roles of the department heads to make sure that the practice continues as far as each employee in each department goes.
Okay. Yeah, so Sam, yeah, I'm definitely going to make the change that we talked about. And so maybe if anybody else wants to note another change that they want to see made, then I'll know which ones to make, and your motion can kind of reference.
Yeah, I'm fine. Let's let her go. Let's get her going.
I don't know if Tom has his hand up to.
Well, if I may, Mr. President, Matt, I mean, this is certainly something that's kind of a fluid situation. So as we go between now and March 31st, if you feel that amendments to this policy are warranted to bring before the board, we can approve amendments or disapprove of amendments, or, however you want to approach it. But I mean, things over the next 3 months are going to change significantly one way or the other. So bring any changes to us, I would encourage, and we can make amendments as necessary.
Okay. Well, for purposes of the one that'll potentially go into effect with your vote, I will plan to make Sam's change, and then unless anybody else mentions anything here, I'll just stick with that. And like you said, if anyone thinks of anything, or if from our side we have a different experience than we thought we would, then we can certainly come back and revise the policy.
And so Alderman Caruso, I believe Alderman motion out to accept the policy as presented, provided that his suggestions be added in.
Yep, that works for me.
I'll second.
And we have a second. All right, so the motion has been seconded. Is there any further discussion or debate on this? Hearing and seeing none, would all those in favor please indicate by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
And those opposed? Motion carries. Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Attorney Bloomer.
Yep, thank you. And apologies again for it coming together kind of at the 11th hour here. Thanks for the discussion.
Yep. And you have 2 more executive sessions. We'll move those to the end. So that actually takes us to reports of standing committees, of which there are none. Reports of select committees, there are none. Reports of representatives, there are none. Petitions, letters, miscellaneous communication, there's nothing. Board of Control Commissioners, we have nothing. Unfinished business. Is there any unfinished business to come before the board? Alderman Grusso.
No, I was waiting for new business. I'm
Oh.
sorry.
That's all right. So I believe there's no unfinished business. So we're on to miscellaneous motions, resolution, new business. Alderman Grusso.
Yes, I'm looking for help on this one because I'm pretty pro business, and this isn't a business problem. It's a good problem. I travel North Main and Woodstock Avenue a lot. I live in that end of town, in my office on this end of town. Saturday, a week ago, last Saturday, I was driving down Woodstock Avenue. Gentleman ahead of me at the light on Woodstock Avenue was going to go across into CVS, and I called him tonight to verify this. I knew him. He was unable to get into CVS. There was a car coming northerly into the CVS parking lot, a car southerly, and they had it blocked. It was people going to the coffee place there, and it's great. It's wonderful that they're there and they're doing a wonderful job. I'm at Starbucks. I don't go there. I don't drink coffee, but is there a way of contacting the landowner or somebody to see if those cars would go further back in the yard, and maybe they could put up cones or something to accept more traffic? It seems like a shallow curve that they're making. They would probably not have that, but I've had this happen to me as I'm traveling south on Route 7 and the light would turn green and I can't go because there's a car sitting there in the road. But they're jamming up that little intersection going into CVS. So, what do I do? I just think it's a problem, it's a city problem. I think it's a traffic jam. It's a great thing to have, but there are people trying to get into like the pharmacy. This guy said he was getting his heart medicine, and I get my prescriptions, and I just didn't know who do we talk to. Do we have one of our people, talk to the landowner? It's just, but there are cars backing out onto Route 7 and waiting for their coffee and blocking the traffic. So what do I do? What do we do?
Traffic committee.
Traffic committee?
I would suggest forwarding it to traffic committee, Sam. Let them take it up with the landowners.
There we go.
There had to have been a site review done for traffic. And I know that there was a discussion of having to use a certain entrance and an exit. So, maybe that's not being followed. And that would have been through our planning commission or our development review board. So that has to be on file somewhere. I think Matt Bloomer could probably put his hands on it, Sammy. And are they, I don't know what it is. And if it is there, are they following the enforcement? I think that's where I'd start as well.
Okay, because believe me, it doesn't happen all the time, and it's not a bad problem that a business has so much customers that they're doing that. But I believe if they went back into the yard more and turned, they could accept more traffic. But right now, or occasionally, they're blocking Route 7 and they're jamming up the traffic there. So I'd like to make a motion that the traffic committee look into the intersection of what's the name of the plaza there? I guess the CVS Starbucks Plaza and Route 7, Route 4. And see what they do about that traffic flow into the Starbucks there. Is that a fair motion?
Second.
Thank you.
So we have a motion that's been seconded to refer to the Traffic Safety Committee, the intersection of 7 and 4, and in particular focusing on the entrance to CVS/Starbucks.
Yes, thank you. Perfect.
We have that motion that's been seconded. Alderman Gillum?
Yes, thank you. They're not the only ones that have the problem. Dunkin' Donuts on Woodstock Avenue is having the same problem because their dining rooms are not open. That is the issue. When they got their permits, when they first built these places, they had their dining room and so many cars going through there an hour. Well, obviously, everybody's going through the drive-thru, and I think every restaurant right now has a drive-thru having the same problem. So somehow we need to do it gently and not go in there and slam dunk them. I think we need to do it nicely. I have no problem, someone contacting, but I think it needs to go to traffic committee. Thank you very much.
And Mr. Chairman, I agree with him, absolutely. And now that's a good point I didn't think of, but I will tell you, in all the times I've driven by, they can go out in that backyard further and turn. They can accept more cars into their yard, and it would be fine. And I'm glad to have them here, and I'm glad they're selling a lot of coffee and that the people like their place. It's wonderful. And you're right, I have seen it at Dunkin' Donuts. It was nothing like up there, and it's a pretty successful place. So whatever, like a nice friendly phone call would be wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So we have a motion that has been seconded to refer this issue to Traffic Committee. Is there any further discussion or debate? I'm hearing and seeing none. So all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much, everyone. So we are still on miscellaneous motions, resolutions, and new business. If we have nothing else, Attorney Bloomer, I will take the language to have us enter executive session.
Okay. And I will try to consolidate these a little bit so you can do the motions for executive session now, and then we can stay in for both and then come back. One of them might require coming back into open session to vote. So with that said, we would need a motion to find that premature general public knowledge regarding pending litigation in 2 cases to which the city is a party would clearly place the city at a substantial disadvantage because the discussion will divulge the city's strategies in such pending litigation and will include confidential attorney-client communications made for the purpose of providing professional legal services to the city.
So moved.
Second.
Second, yep, there we are.
All right, we have a motion, it's been seconded. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? Motion carries.
And then a motion to enter into executive session in the first instance with the inclusion of the city attorney, city assessor, treasurer, and mayor to discuss pending litigation as allowed under Title I, Section 313A1E and Title I, Section 313A1F.
So moved.
So moved. Second.
Been seconded. But all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? Motion carries.
And then for the second executive session, it would be a motion to enter into executive session for the second time with the inclusion of the city attorney, police chief, if he's available, treasurer, and mayor to discuss pending litigation as allowed under Title I, Section 313A1E and Title I, Section 313A1F.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion, it's been seconded. Would all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? Motion carries.
Okay, everybody should have hopefully received the executive session login. And so we can see you on the flip side, although I don't know if Barry is on or Chief Kilcullen.
I'm not sure if I'm not sure if he was planning on coming on. I've got his phone number right here in front of me, so if you think anybody needs him to come on, I'll try to get him on.
Okay, well, why don't we go in and then we can determine if he's needed.
Okay.
Okay.
Very good. See you all in executive session. So Matt, if you could repeat that motion one more time so it's on record.
Okay. Motion to authorize the mayor to enter into a settlement with Joseph, Barbara, and David Giancola in substantially the form presented at your last regular meeting, or at the board's last regular meeting.
And I so moved.
All right, so we have a motion, it's been seconded. Is there any discussion or debate on this issue? Let me go and give a second. Hearing and seeing none, would all those in favor please indicate by saying aye?
Aye.
Aye.
And those opposed?
No.
I believe Alderwoman Humphrey and Alderwoman Ryan said no. Perfect. Thank you, guys. So motion passes 8-2. If there's nothing else,
I'll move to adjourn.
Second.
we have a motion that's been seconded to adjourn. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed?
Happy New Year.
We are adjourned. Happy New Year.